What's poppin', everyone? Tara Lynch here with the next big thing, the videocast that shares all things infotainment. Now, why should young people social distance? Well, Connecticut State Senator Will Haskell joins us to tell us why. And of course, we go over this week's top stories and trends. Let's jump right in. We begin, as always, with our trends in news. The Senate passed a $480 billion relief package earlier this week. Now, you may be asking yourself, why another package? Well, state leaders have pushed Washington to pass something else because they say the first stimulus package did not help the states recover in order to relaunch their economies after COVID-19. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pushed this package along that looks to help small businesses as well as increase COVID-19 testing. Republicans did push back, though. They said that the government cannot afford another bailout, but via a voice vote, the Senate did pass this bill and it will move on to the House. Here's what Senator Chuck Schumer had to say.
We need testing. We will not get America moving again until we have a nationwide, well thought out, well executed testing program.
From politics to the gridiron, we move on to our trends in sports. Now, with the first pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select the next big thing. Well, no, not the show, but they are on the clock right now. The Bengals have the first pick later tonight. Now, the draft picks look to take it all the way to the house. Well, quite literally, because they will be drafted from their homes this year via a virtual draft, just like the WNBA last week. Now, some names to look out for: Joe Burrow, quarterback from LSU, Isaiah Simmons, power linebacker from Clemson, and of course, Chase Young, defensive end from Ohio State. Now, the NFL Draft kicks off tonight at 8 p.m. on ESPN and ABC. We move on now to our trends in politics. State Senator William Haskell in Connecticut is at the forefront of COVID-19 legislation in the state. He is the youngest member of the state Senate at 24 years old, and he's continuing to push his peers to follow social distancing guidelines. State Senator William Haskell, thank you so much for joining me today.
Tara, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be a part of the program, and I wouldn't say I'm necessarily at the forefront, but I'm honored to do what any elected official and every elected official is doing right now, which is every day fielding questions from our constituents in this moment of crisis, trying to lend a hand wherever we can. So grateful to share a few moments here.
Well, we can see right behind you, you're also working from home. The session in Hartford has been suspended for this period of time. So how has your job changed since you're working from home just like the rest of us?
So to be totally honest with you, I expected to spend April legislating, driving up to Hartford from my home in Westport every single day, spending late nights in the Capitol trying to file amendments and pass bills, withstand Republican filibusters, and you name it. Of course, all of that's been put on hold. The Capitol complex has been closed for over a month now. So that means the job has shifted from legislative responsibilities to entirely constituent services, picking up the phone each and every time someone reaches out with a problem with their unemployment claim, or to ask for help for their small business, which they've built up for years, but now they don't know how they're going to keep afloat because of the loss in revenue. Folks are struggling in a myriad of ways across my community, and while I was excited about all the legislative work that I was going to be doing, what takes precedent right now, the most important thing is just being a voice on the other end of the phone for folks. It can be hard to pick up the phone and get a hold of the White House or higher office, but your state senator, your state representatives, our job is to be accessible and to be a friendly, comforting, and hopefully helpful voice on the other end of that phone.
That's awesome. And for some people who maybe are seeing this that aren't from Connecticut, you represent the 26th district in Fairfield County, one of the hardest hit areas of Westport, your hometown. A lot of officials are highlighting elderly people as well as children as the most vulnerable groups for COVID-19. But your campaign has been encouraging young people in our age demographic to social distance and to take it seriously. So why is it important for young people to take this social distancing thing seriously?
I'm so glad you brought this up. Look, Fairfield County has been hit especially hard because we're so close to New York City. The very first case of COVID-19 in Connecticut was a constituent of mine in Wilton. Luckily, he was able to make a recovery. He's back with his family, but I have far too many constituents who have died and far more who are worried about what tomorrow might bring. If you watch the news, you hear a lot about those who have underlying health conditions or those who are elderly, but we all have a role to play. And although we're very much isolated right now, the reality is we're in this together. And it disturbed me in the very first few weeks of this pandemic to see some folks my age and a little bit younger, some college students, some high school students start to think of this as a snow day or a vacation, when in fact it's anything but. It is a civic duty to stay home. Even if you yourself are not vulnerable, you are endangering those around you. And unfortunately, we've even seen folks protesting here in Connecticut to try to reopen the economy before public health officials tell us that it's safe to do so. It would be one thing if these protesters were endangering their own lives. I would lose less sleep over it, but they're endangering everyone else's lives. They're endangering the lives of my grandparents. So I've been Skyping and Zooming and going on Instagram with as many student groups as I possibly can, as many high school students and classrooms, to let them know that they have a role to play. The history books, I believe, will watch how each of us responded to this crisis. And if you love your grandparents, for the love of God, please stay home.
You mentioned something there. History has its eyes on us. That's, of course, from Hamilton, but you're certainly right on that. And to kind of wrap up our questions here, some predictions say this quarantine can last well into the fall. Of course, the fall being election season 2020. How can young people stay involved despite COVID-19 in this political process?
Tara, I'm so glad you asked that question. First of all, while young people are stuck at home, there's a lot that they can do to learn about who their elected officials are and to volunteer, whether it's in an official capacity or just as a part-time volunteer or intern. Every campaign needs help. We're all trying to figure out how we can reach our constituents, how we can reach our voters, how we can be accessible without going door to door or living room to living room like you would normally do in the course of a campaign. So my team is thinking really creatively about how we can do more texting, how we can get on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and we've even had conversations about TikTok. But frankly, we need young people to bring the knowledge and expertise that they have and to join our campaign. We've got dozens of campaign interns, and I'll tell you, of course, we're not campaigning right now. We're laser focused on promoting public health. So what we've asked them to do, instead of phone banking and asking them to vote for someone over someone else, we're asking them to phone bank seniors in their community so that they can be a friendly face for those who might feel alone, so that they can listen to the concerns of the folks in the community, and most importantly, so that they can ask if they need help. And already we've had folks say, you know what, I don't feel safe going to the grocery store. Given the rise in cases in my area, I don't feel safe venturing outside the home. And we're able to connect them with services. Sometimes we go grocery shopping for them ourselves. So we need help. Young people do have a role to play, even if it's from home. And I hope nobody uses this moment to disengage from the political process. In fact, I think we need the exact opposite. We need folks to step forward and lend a hand, because in a way, circling back to that theme of history, there are a few moments in American history where you read about how citizens turned to government for help because all other systems failed, whether it's bread lines during the Great Depression or so many other moments where it was elected officials and government to make sure that they made the necessary investments to revitalize our economy. We happen to be living through one of those moments, and it's so important that everybody step off the sidelines and get involved. To make sure you're registered to vote, get an absentee ballot for this November, figure out how you can volunteer from home, and check in on your community.
Senator Haskell, thank you so much for joining me today. So many important things that we were able to cover.
So happy to join, and I look forward to continuing the conversation anytime you'd like.
Well, Senator William Haskell, as you just saw, had some really important things to say to young people. I'd like to bring in a young resident of Fairfield County, Stephen Blinder of Wilton, Connecticut. Stephen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, Tara, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
So Stephen, obviously your area has been hit the hardest in Connecticut as it's so close to New York City. So what have you been doing to social distance, and why do you think it's so important for young people to take this seriously?
Yeah, Tara, thanks for the question. I have the somber task of each day going through all of the local newspapers and looking at the obituaries and compiling them for many of our elected officials. It's just so saddening to see not only how many people I actually know, but just the wide variety of age groups impacted by COVID-19. No one is immune from this virus. And of course, it's a critical juncture in our nation's history, not just in Washington, but also in Hartford, in Cheshire, and right here in Wilton. As you rightly say, Fairfield County has been deeply impacted by the coronavirus. And of course, while I'm keeping my distance and practicing social distancing here at home, I'm also most concerned about the vulnerable community members here in Wilton. So I'm working hard to communicate with our local non-for-profits, our organizations, to make sure that these people get the necessary resources they need to make it through this pandemic. So it is a really difficult time, but I just can't stress enough how important it is that we exercise caution and vigilance as young people. We may not be the most vulnerable in our society, but we can certainly, if we don't practice social distancing, the consequences are just tremendous. I just can't emphasize that enough for the older community members and also for children. So we've got to take this seriously, and we've got to make sure that we're part of the solution. We've got to make sure that we do exactly as I'm suggesting, which is reaching out to our community organizations and trying to help those in need. So I'm taking this seriously. I'm on the phone each day with our elected officials, and I just hope from Hartford down to Stamford, young people understand the importance, and that there really is, as Senator Haskell often says, there is no minimum age to being on the right side of history.
You're exactly correct. I mean, you and I were both in that age group of people who might just be carriers of COVID-19. So it's so important just to keep those other age groups in mind. Of course, we're doing this via Zoom as well, so we're keeping our distance. Stephen, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your insight.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. And I got to say, thanks for all the work that you're doing as a journalist. It really is more important than ever these days.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Those social distancing guidelines are so very important, and we will keep those in mind. We transition now to take a look at some of the trends we love this week. Reading is succeeding, and former First Lady Michelle Obama has launched a 4-week reading series on PBS for kids at noon on Mondays. She's reading books like There's a Dragon in Your Book, as well as The Very Hungry Caterpillar, some iconic stories to be told there. During the Obama administration, Mrs. Obama launched a reading campaign for children across the country. Now she looks to do the same thing, helping kids brush up on those very important reading skills while providing parents a bit of quiet time during some long days. From books to our trends at bedtime, you may be able to find a little bit of Disney magic on your phone before you hit the hay. Disney launched a special bedtime hotline where you can call in and get a special message from Mickey, Minnie, and the gang. This will sure add a little bit of pixie dust to make sure you have sweet dreams. Call 1-877-7-MICKEY, and of course, have a magical day. We move on now to our trends in music. With no roommates, coworkers, or classmates around, have you found yourself humming or listening to some more music to pass the time? Well, you're not alone. A lot of people have been turning to music, and here are some of the top hits that are trending right now on Spotify. We begin with this one.
You don't gotta go to work, but you gotta.
Of course, Work From Home by Fifth Harmony taking that top spot, fittingly so, followed by Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, a recent top hit, and of course the classic, Dolly Parton, 9 to 5. Check out those hits and more to help you get through your long work or school day. To round out our show, we finish with our trend for you this week. Turn off those screens, put away that Netflix, those video games, and try picking up a book. Reading can be really helpful to not only pass the time, but also to learn something during this quarantine. If you're like me and you're not a big reader, try starting small. Read some articles, read a magazine, anything online, something you can scroll through and maybe skim through in order to learn something new, but also, pass the time in a different way. A lot of us get caught up on Netflix, so it's important to find some different avenues in order to pass the time. Okay, all you cool cats and kittens, that's all the time we have today for the next big thing. If you have something big to share or want to be featured, comment below at the Tara Lynch for more information, and come back next week for more. Always remember, when you need the news that pops, I'll be here with the next big thing. Tara Lynch, out.